Have you ever loved someone in silence? Truly loved them with all your heart and soul but never uttered a word? If the answer is yes, Jung discovered something about you. Something that will fundamentally change how you understand this experience, and what Huberman's neuroscience has revealed about what happens inside your brain when you love in silence will absolutely blow your mind. Most people think silent love is simply unrequited love. They think it's weakness, fear of rejection, emotional cowardice. But Jung discovered that loving in silence is one of the most transformative experiences a soul can have. And Huberman has proven that your brain literally reconfigures itself when you go through it. Let me explain what's really happening inside you. Jung identified a phenomenon he called anima projection. When a man falls in love, especially when he falls deeply for someone he can't have, he isn't simply attracted to a person. He is projecting his own feminine soul, his anima, onto that person. The same is true for women through the animus. When a woman loves in silence, she projects her internal masculine principle onto the object of her love. This isn't metaphor. This isn't poetic language. This is deep psychology, based on decades of clinical observation. And here's the part no one tells you. When you love in silence, this projection intensifies, because there's no reality to break the illusion. There's no real interaction to show the person's flaws. There's no rejection to force you to retract your projection. Silent love is the purest form of anima or animus projection, and this has profound neurological consequences. Huberman studied what happens in the brain during states of intense attachment, and what he discovered completely validates what Jung intuited over a century ago. When you love someone, especially when that love is unrequited, two neurological systems come into direct conflict inside your brain. The first is the dopamine system. Dopamine isn't about pleasure, as most people think. It's about wanting. It's about seeking. It's about the desire for something you don't have. When you love in silence, your dopaminergic system goes into overdrive. Every thought about the person releases dopamine. Every fantasy about what could be. Every glimpse of the person on the street. Your brain is constantly being bathed in dopamine because the object of your desire is always out of reach. But here's the catch. Dopamine is only released by anticipation, by seeking, by unfulfilled desire. The moment you get what you want, the dopamine drops. And that's why real relationships, after the initial phase, lose that intensity. Silent love, by definition, never consummates, which means the dopamine never drops. You are trapped in a permanent state of intense desire. This is neurologically equivalent to addiction. Your brain is literally addicted to someone you can't have. But hold on, because that's only half the story. The second system is the oxytocin system. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone, but that's an oversimplification. Oxytocin is about connection, about attachment, about belonging. In normal relationships, oxytocin is released through touch, eye contact, physical proximity, sexual intimacy. It creates bonds. But in silent love, you don't have access to these forms of oxytocin release. You crave the connection, but you can't have it. Your body yearns for oxytocin that isn't coming. And here's what Kim and Park's 2023 research discovered. When dopamine and oxytocin interact in the striatum, they literally reorganize your neural networks. The connection pattern between your neurons shifts. When you love in silence for long enough, your brain remodels itself around that love. The neural pathways that process that person become stronger, more established, more permanent. And that's why it's so hard to forget someone you loved in silence. It's not just emotional memory. It's neural architecture. Your brain has literally built roads dedicated to that person. Jung knew this intuitively. He wrote that an anima projection that is never retracted becomes a permanent part of the psyche. The person projects their soul onto someone, and if they never confront that projection, it crystallizes. It becomes structural. Now, do you understand why silent love is so transformative? You're not just feeling emotions. You're remodeling your brain and your psyche at the same time. But why does your soul carry something that few understand? What exactly are you carrying? Jung identified 5 specific burdens that people who love in silence carry, and each of them has neurological validation in Huberman's research. The first burden is heightened inner perception. When you love in silence, you are forced to live much of that love internally. There are no conversations with the person. There are no shared experiences. All you have are your thoughts, your fantasies, your imaginations. This forces a development of the inner life that most people never experience. You learn to live in 2 worlds simultaneously: the external world, where the person exists as a stranger, and the inner world, where they are your soulmate. Jung called this process developing active imagination. It's the ability to have psychic experiences as real as physical experiences. Huberman identified that this is associated with the default mode network, the neural network that activates when we are in states of self-reflection, imagination, and internal processing. People who love in silence develop more robust default mode networks. This isn't a disadvantage, it's a superpower. Once you develop this ability to live intensely in the inner world, you can apply it to anything: creativity, problem-solving, meditation, self-awareness. Silent love is an involuntary workout for the development of consciousness. The second burden is tolerance for emotional pain. Loving in silence hurts. There's no other way to say it. Seeing the person you love, knowing you can't have them, maybe even seeing them with someone else, that's pure pain. But here's what neuroscience has discovered. Emotional pain and physical pain are processed by the same brain regions. The anterior cingulate cortex doesn't distinguish between the two. To your brain, a broken heart and a broken bone activate the same circuits. And just as training with physical pain increases your tolerance for physical pain, living with emotional pain increases your tolerance for emotional pain. People who have loved in silence develop an ability to endure emotional discomfort that others simply don't have. They spent years in a state of chronic longing. After that, most emotional challenges seem manageable. Jung observed this in his patients. Those with histories of unrequited or unspoken love were often the most emotionally resilient, not because they were inherently stronger, but because the very process of loving in silence strengthened them. The third burden is the capacity for conscious projection. Most people project unconsciously, all the time. They project their shadows onto enemies, their animus onto lovers, their complexes onto authority figures. And they never realize what they're doing. But when you love silently, especially for extended periods, something interesting happens. You begin to notice the projection. Maybe you notice that the real person doesn't quite match the image you've created in your mind. Maybe you realize that your fantasies say more about you than they do about them. Maybe, in moments of clarity, you recognize that you're projecting your soul onto a fallible human being. This recognition is the first step toward what Jung called anima projection retrieval. It's the moment when you start to separate what is theirs and what is yours. People who've experienced prolonged silent love often develop this ability to see their own projections. They've learned the hard way that what they see in others isn't always real. This skill is invaluable. It means you can enter future relationships with greater clarity. You can recognize me when you're projecting and adjust accordingly. You can love real people instead of idealized images. Hold on to that thought, because it'll make sense when I reveal the fourth burden. The fourth burden is the forced integration of the anima or animus. Jung taught that the goal of psychological development is individuation, becoming whole, integrating all parts of yourself, including the unconscious parts. One of the most important tasks of individuation is integrating the anima for men or the animus for women. This typically happens through relationships. You project. Reality frustrates the projection. You retrieve and eventually integrate. But in unspoken love, this process happens differently, without the reality, to force the retrieval. Many people get stuck in the projection. For years, however, for some souls, something different happens. The very intensity of the experience, the prolonged pain, the constant reflection, eventually forces an integration through another pathway, instead of retrieving the projection. Because reality frustrated it, you start to retrieve it. Because the inner process has matured, you don't need the real person to integrate your anima or animus. You do it through inner work. Jung considered this a higher form of integration, more difficult, yes, but more painful, definitely, but potentially more complete. People who manage to do this carry an integration that doesn't depend on external partners. They've done the work themselves. And the fifth burden is the deepest of all. The fifth burden is the awareness of the symbolic nature of love. Most people think that love is about the other person, or about finding the right person, having the right relationship, living the right life together. But Jung discovered something unsettling. Human love is always, on some level, symbolic. When we love, we don't just love a person. We love what they represent. We love the image we project onto them. We love the promise of completeness that they seem to offer. This doesn't mean that love isn't real. It's deeply real, but it's real in a different way than we imagine. People who have loved in silence often come to this understanding because without the distraction of a real relationship, they're forced to confront the nature of love itself. What exactly do you love? When you love someone, you don't truly know. What do you desire when you desire someone you've never touched? What do you yearn for when you yearn for someone who may not even know you exist? The answer, Jung would say, is that you love and desire and yearn for something in yourself, something you've projected onto the other, something you need to integrate. This awareness is devastating. At first, it may seem that your love wasn't real. It may seem that you've wasted years on an illusion. But after the devastation comes something different, a deeper understanding of what love really is, an ability to love more consciously, more maturely, more integrated. People who carry this awareness love differently. They don't love less intensely. They love more consciously. They know that they are always, on some level, loving symbols and projections, and that awareness makes them paradoxically more capable of loving real people. Now, if this content is making sense to you, if finally someone is putting into words from what you've experienced but never been able to explain, consider supporting this work through super thanks. This connection between Jung and Huberman has been suppressed for decades. Academia keeps psychology and neuroscience in separate boxes. Few have the courage to show how modern science validates the profound wisdom that Jung discovered a century ago. When you click the golden heart, you're not just supporting financially, you're saying, continue revealing what academia hides, continue uniting deep psychology with neuroscience, continue helping me understand what my soul is carrying. You're not just a passive spectator of this content. You're part of a community that seeks to understand the deepest layers of human experience. But I'm not finished yet, because now I need to reveal to you the protocol that Huberman validated to transform silent love into conscious growth. Before I give you the protocol, I need to explain why it works. And for that, I need to tell you about Helen Fisher's discovery. Helen Fisher is a biological anthropologist who spent decades studying love from a neurological perspective, and she identified something that completely validates Jung's view on unspoken love. Fisher discovered that love isn't a single emotion. It's actually three distinct brain systems that can operate together or separately. The first system is lust. It's governed by testosterone. In both sexes, it's the raw sexual drive, the physical desire, the urge to reproduce. The second system is romantic attraction. It's governed by dopamine. It's that feeling of being in love, of not being able to stop thinking about someone, of feeling euphoria when you see them. The third system is attachment. It's governed by oxytocin and vasopressin. It's the long-term bond, the feeling of comfort with someone, the deep connection. Here is the crucial insight. In normal relationships, these three systems align eventually. You feel attraction, which leads to intimacy, which generates attachment. But in unspoken love, something different happens. You've got the romantic attraction system in overdrive, dopamine constantly firing, obsessive thoughts about the person, euphoria and agony alternating. It's a roller coaster, but you don't have corresponding activation of the other systems. Without physical intimacy, the lust remains abstract, like a painting you can't touch. Without real shared experiences, attachment doesn't fully form. You're building a castle on sand. The result is a profound neurological imbalance. Your brain is experiencing intense love without the components that normally anchor it and eventually calm it. It's like revving an engine with no transmission, all that power going nowhere. Jung described this in different terms. He spoke about love that remains in the realm of fantasy, never touching the solid ground of reality, about anima projection. That's never tested against the real person. It's like seeing a mirage, thinking it's water, but it's just heat. But the conclusion is the same. Silent love is an intensified and unbalanced form of loving experience. And that's why it's so transformative. It's a crucible, a fiery furnace. It reshapes you. And that's why it leaves such deep marks. Scars that can last a lifetime. Now, the protocol. What Huberman discovered about neuroplasticity shows that the brain can be consciously reconfigured. The same mechanisms that created the patterns of silent love can be used to transform them. It's like rewiring a circuit board. And what Jung taught about anima and animus integration shows that there is a path of development through unrequited love, not despite it, but through it. It's not a dead end. It's a turn, a chance to become more whole. The protocol has 5 steps. That should be practiced for at least 90 days. That's the minimum time to create new, stable neural patterns, according to Huberman's research. Patience is key. Step 1. Conscious recognition of the projection. Every day, preferably in the morning, set aside 5 minutes for what Jung called active imagination, focused on the projection. Sit in silence. Bring the image of the person to your mind but instead of fantasizing about them, as you normally do something different. Ask, what is it about this person that attracts me? What qualities do I see in them? Be specific. Don't just say they're amazing. List the specific qualities: intelligence, humor, beauty, mystery, kindness, whatever it is. Dig deep. Now ask, do these qualities exist in me? If you're attracted to their intelligence, do you value your own intelligence? If you love their humor, do you express your own humor? If you admire their courage, well, do you recognize your own courage? Are you shining that light or hiding it? Jung taught that we project what we don't recognize in ourselves. It's like seeing your own reflection in someone else's eyes. If you project kindness onto someone, it may be because you don't recognize your own kindness. If you project mystery, it may be because you repress your own mysterious side. This exercise begins to separate what is theirs and what is yours. It's the first step to reclaiming the projection, bringing those pieces of yourself back home, neurologically. You are creating new pathways in the prefrontal cortex that modulate the activity of the limbic system. You're training your brain to process attraction in a more conscious and less reactive way, taking control of the narrative. Step 2. Dopamine journal. Huberman talks a lot about dopamine management, and in Silent Love, you have a serious dopamine problem. Your system is constantly activated by someone you can't have. It's like a slot machine that never pays out. The dopamine journal is a tool to become aware of this, a way to break free from the cycle. Every night, before sleep, write down, how many times today did I think about this person? What triggered those thoughts? How did I feel before the thought? How did I feel during? How did I feel after? Be honest, don't judge, just observe and record. Become a scientist of your own mind. What you'll discover over weeks is that certain triggers are predictable. Certain emotional states lead you to think about them. Certain situations, certain places, certain times, patterns will emerge. Once you identify the triggers, you can begin to intervene. Not to suppress the thoughts, and that doesn't work. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater, but to understand them and eventually transform them. Shift your focus. Jung would call this bringing the unconscious to consciousness. Huberman would call it creating top-down regulation of the limbic system. Same process, different language. Step 3. Investment in oxytocin alternatives. Remember I said that in Silent Love. You have too much dopamine and too little oxytocin? The third step addresses this directly. Oxytocin is released by connection. But it doesn't have to be romantic connection. It can be deep friendship. It can be family. It can even be connection with animals. Studies show that petting a dog releases oxytocin in both the human and the animal, a win-win. During the 90 days, consciously invest in sources of oxytocin that don't depend on the person you love. Diversify your emotional portfolio. Spend more time with true friends. Reconnect with family members. If you don't have deep relationships, start building them. Offer help to others. Receive help from others. Physical touch, non-romantic touch, hugs from friends have a real neurological effect. It's like a shot of emotional medicine. You're rebalancing your system, giving your brain the oxytocin it desperately needs from sources that are available. Building a support network. This won't make you stop loving the person, but it will make your love less desperate, less consuming, less painful. It will take the edge off. Jung would say that you're distributing your psychic energy in a healthier way, not putting your entire soul into a single projection, but investing in multiple, real connections, spreading the love. Step 4. Ritualization of grief. This is the most difficult step. It's the one that most people avoid. It's the one that makes all the difference, or it's the key. Loving in silence involves a loss. You've lost something you never had. But the loss is real. You've lost the possibility. You've lost the future you imagined. You've lost the version of yourself that would exist in that relationship. It's a phantom limb. That loss needs to be mourned, not avoided, not suppressed, not rationalized and mourned. Set aside a time each week, the same time, the same place if possible, to consciously mourn this loss. It can be 15 minutes, it can be an hour, and whatever you need, create a sacred space during this time. Allow yourself to feel everything. The sadness, the regret, the anger, the frustration, the longing for what never was. Let it wash over you. If you need to cry, cry. If you need to scream, scream. If you need to write letters that you'll never send, write, let it all out. But when the time is up, get up, clean your face, go back to life. Don't dwell. Jung taught that emotions that are not expressed don't disappear. They go into the unconscious now, and from there, they control our lives in ways we don't perceive. They fester, like a wound left untreated. By ritualizing grief, you give conscious expression to the pain. You process it through the system. Instead of letting it accumulate, you're releasing the pressure. Huberman validated this in terms of trauma processing. Emotions that are experienced fully, in a safe context, are metabolized by the brain. They lose their charge, they integrate. The wound heals. Step 5. Retrieval of the projection through dreams. This is the most Jungian step of all, and it's the one that may seem the strangest to those unfamiliar with Jung's work. But it's also potentially the most powerful. It's the deepest dive. Jung discovered that dreams are the primary way the unconscious communicates with consciousness, and when you're actively working on anima or animus integration, your dreams often reflect this inner process. Before you go to sleep, ask your unconscious a direct question. It could be, what do I need to understand about this unspoken love? Or, what does this person represent to me on a deeper level? Or even, what aspect of myself do I need to integrate? Don't expect a literal answer delivered on a silver platter. Dreams speak in the language of symbols. Keep a journal or notebook right beside your bed when you wake up. Before you do anything else, including checking your phone, jot down any dream fragments you can recall. Don't judge them. Don't try to interpret them yet. Just record. Over the course of weeks, patterns will begin to emerge. Recurring images, repeated themes. And among these patterns, the person you love, the object of your silent love, will frequently appear. But they'll appear in symbolic forms that reveal what they represent psychologically. Jung called this symbol amplification. You don't interpret the dream literally. Instead, you ask, what else in my life, or in human culture, resembles this symbol? You amplify the symbol, expanding its meaning, until its significance is revealed. This approach might sound too mystical, a little too woo-woo for some, but Huberman has validated that sleep, especially REM sleep, is absolutely crucial for emotional processing and consolidating learning. Working with your dreams isn't some form of New Age superstition. It's making conscious use of a neurological process that's happening whether you're aware of it or not. Over these 90 days, if you consistently practice these 5 steps, something profound will start to shift. It won't necessarily change the love itself. You might continue loving that person for a long time. Silent love leaves deeply ingrained marks. But your relationship with that love will change. It will become less consuming, less desperate, more integrated, and much more conscious. And something else will happen. The qualities you were projecting onto that other person will start to manifest within yourself. The beauty you saw in her, you'll begin to recognize in yourself. The strength you admired, you'll discover you've possessed all along. This is what Jung called the recovery of the projection. It's the moment when you stop searching for your soul in someone else and start seeing it reflected in yourself. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was a patient of a Jungian analyst who sought help for an unrequited love that had persisted for 8 long years. 8 years silently loving a co-worker. She never knew. He never spoke a word. When he started analysis, Marcus was convinced that his problem was simply a lack of courage to confess his feelings. He desperately wanted the analyst to help him finally speak his truth. But the analyst, following the Jungian tradition, did something entirely different. He asked Marcus to describe the woman in detail. What exactly attracted him to her? Marcus spoke for entire sessions, pouring out his heart, detailing her intelligence, how she seemed to understand things that others didn't, her fierce independence, the way she moved through the world without needing anyone's approval. The analyst then asked, "Marcus, do you see yourself as intelligent, independent, someone who understands things that others don't?" Marcus hesitated. "No," he said. "I'm pretty average actually." The analyst simply smiled. "You're projecting," he said gently. "Everything you love in her exists within you. You just don't allow yourself to see it." The following months were filled with hard work. Marcus initially resisted. He wanted to go back to talking about her, about the relationship they could have had, about the life he had imagined. But gradually, through the protocol the analyst prescribed, something began to transform. Marcus started to recognize his own intelligence. He began expressing opinions he had previously kept hidden. He started making independent decisions instead of constantly seeking approval. And something strange happened. The more he cultivated these qualities within himself, the less obsessed he became with her. Not because he loved her any less, but because he no longer needed her to access those parts of himself. At the end of 2 years of analysis, Marcus still loved her, but in a different way. Less desperate, more peaceful, more integrated. He never confessed his love. He didn't need to. What he was truly seeking in her, he found within himself. This is the promise of silent love, when consciously worked with. It's not that the pain magically disappears. It's not that you stop loving them. It's that the love transforms from a prison into a portal, from an addiction into a developmental opportunity, from suffering into profound growth. Not everyone can achieve this. Some remain trapped in silent love forever, never reclaiming the projection, never doing the inner work. But for those who do, silent love becomes one of the most transformative experiences of their life, not despite the pain, but through it. This is what your soul carries, something that few truly understand. It's not simply unrequited love, it's a potential for transformation that most people never even access. Now, a final reflection. We live in a culture that places immense value on consummated love, relationships, marriages, partners. The constant message is that you need someone else to be complete, that true love is reciprocated love. Jung challenged this prevailing cultural narrative. He viewed love, including unrequited love, as a pathway to psychological development, a way to discover within yourself what you are projecting onto others. Huberman, through the lens of neuroscience, reveals that love transforms the brain, that experiences of intense attachment, even unfulfilled attachment, create structural changes. What this ultimately means is that your silent love wasn't in vain. It wasn't a waste of time or energy. It wasn't a sign of weakness or cowardice. It was a transformative experience that has shaped who you are. It has left indelible marks on your brain and your psyche. It has taught you things about yourself that you could never have learned any other way. The question isn't whether you've been transformed. You have been. The question is whether you will use that transformation consciously, whether you will undertake the necessary work of integration, whether you will transform pain into wisdom and longing into self-awareness. This is the invitation. This is the path that few understand, but that your soul is perfectly prepared to traverse. Comment down below. Silence. If you've ever loved someone silently, and you finally understand what your soul was carrying, write silence. I want to know how many of you are recognizing your own experience in this video, and if you know someone who is silently in love, who carries this weight without understanding why. Share this video. It might be the explanation they need to finally start transforming pain into growth. Your silent love wasn't in vain. Your soul carries something precious. The question is, Are you ready to discover what it is? Until the next video,